Hello, everyone, and welcome in here to the GoPowercat Postgame Podcast, Kansas State and BYU recap. You're watching this live. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. No, we did not stay up and go live after the game last night. I'm not sure anybody would have been able to handle that. And if we did, we probably would have gotten sworn off of the airs. But we are all here. The gang is back for round two. I'm Cole Carmody with Brien, Hanley, and Ryan Wallace. Guys, we've got a lot to talk about from this game. Obviously, Kansas State suffers a loss. I don't even remember the score. I don't want to know the score, but that's what we do in a post-game podcast is we talk about the game. So I'm just going to let one of you guys go first because this has been wild. And Big B, I'll start with you. Give me your thoughts after Kansas State's loss in Provo.
Well, I mean, look, it was a disaster. Let's just start there. It was an absolute disaster. To be dominating a football game physically for the first, I don't know, let's call it 27 minutes, and then for it to completely fall apart on you and you not be able to stem the tide, not even a little bit, like couldn't stem the tide, couldn't stop any type of momentum is disheartening. From all aspects. Let's just be honest. The guys fell apart. They did. Their first test, and I guess you should say, I mean, I know they played at Tulane, but clearly Tulane's not BYU. The atmosphere is not even close to the same. And for them to not even be able to fight back, that's what is disheartening to me, is that they didn't fight back. And I didn't think you could ever say that about a K-State football team. Well, you could say that what happened last night. Does that mean that's going to move on for the rest of the season? It doesn't mean that. But if we can't be honest about what we see, then we shouldn't even watch the games. Bottom line is they got punched in the mouth and they laid down. No easier way to say it than that. They just laid down and didn't fight back. And it was really, I don't know. I was disheartened, Ryan. I really was.
I didn't know if I was going to join this live originally this weekend because I was telling Fitz and you guys that I might have church first and some other obligations with my daughter later on in the afternoon. But I decided I woke up this morning and I couldn't fall asleep last night. Woke up this morning. I looked at my wife. I said, we're skipping church, but I still might need Jesus after what I'm about to do on this live stream. Here's the thing, and I still stand by it. I went back and kind of rewatched some of the big plays from last night again this morning. And like kind of what Brien was saying, it's like on one hand, there were so many weird things that happened that I just like don't expect to ever happen again, especially like at the amount that they did last night. But you cannot discount some of the, maybe not 5 alarm fires, but I mean, some small alarms that are starting to go off that are consistent, not just last night, but through the first 4 weeks of football. That hopefully is kind of what we'll address here. And we can get into some of the fluke stuff. And I really don't want this recap to be a discredit to BYU at all. You have to win the game. But I think statistically, you still go back and hopefully I can try and show that a little bit with some numbers that, unfortunately, this was, like Brien said, a game that they gave away more than I think BYU won.
Yeah, and I saw a stat about how dominant BYU has been in night games, and I think that maybe something is that can be overlooked at times, is especially as covering K-State. I couldn't tell you the last time I watched a full night BYU game. I consider myself an avid college football fan and will stay up until the wee hours of the morning and watch college football. But BYU, before they joined the Big 12, was never really a team that I paid much attention to. And BYU, you have my attention, and I think now this is their first real welcome to the Big 12. You are officially a new member. That was impressive. I mean, I wasn't there at the game, obviously, but that atmosphere looked absolutely tremendous. And I think Fitz said it in his post-game talk. There's other atmospheres in the Big 12 that are like that. It's not like BYU is unique in its atmosphere, but I almost wonder a little bit if K-State went in there and they just didn't know what to expect. You go into Stillwater, you know what to expect. You go into Ames, you know what to expect. I think they were shocked, quite frankly, about how much energy BYU played, about how they fed off the crowd. And I think they kind of took for granted, oh, we're kicking field goals. Our defense is getting stops. We're playing fine. And then when they got punched in the mouth, it, for better lack of a term, it all went into the can. I like to make baseball analogies because I always go back on that. But, guys, it feels like K-State was leaving a lot of runners in scoring position, but they knew they were better than the other team. And so then what happens? The other team starts to put the ball in play. They made 3 errors in a row, and then they gave up a grand slam. Or then they give up a 3-run home run. Then the next 2 guys hit home runs. And just like that, before you know it, you were down 5 runs when you thought that you were going to blow the other team out. And they just couldn't recover. So, again, it was really not much that I felt like that BYU did. It was more so what K-State did to themselves. And we can dig into that and kind of look at, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? But the bottom line is, guys, K-State did everything to themselves. And it was just, I think that's why this game was so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, look, the penalties are the pre-snap penalties are mind-numbing. And we can talk about that. But Cole, if what you say is true, and I'm not saying whether it is or it isn't, but if K-State wasn't ready for the atmosphere, then that's a coaching issue. I can tell you that right now. So I don't know that they weren't ready. I just don't think they handled it properly.
Yeah.
And that might be that. I think that's more the case than anything, is that you get punched in the mouth at Tulane. Not that big of a deal. You can figure a way back because, number one, the talent level is probably not up to snuff. And the atmosphere, we know, I mean, it's I don't even want to get into it, but the atmosphere at a Texas high school football game is going to be better than what it was at Tulane. Just period, point blank. The atmosphere at BYU, on the other hand, is like playing, flip the script. It's like people coming into Manhattan. That's what everybody from Arizona said the previous week. Oh, my God, we couldn't believe this atmosphere. We're used to that. So I don't want to let them off the hook by saying, well, we weren't ready or we didn't know. I just don't think they handled it the way that they were supposed to handle it when somebody literally just punches back. You're stomping them out. You're jabbing them. And then they hit you with an overhand right. And you're like, oh, I didn't see it coming. I have no idea what to do. I don't know where I'm going to do. And that, to me, Ryan, I feel like that's what happened, is that they got hit with a big punch and said, oh, my goodness, I don't know. I don't even know how to box anymore. And that seemed to be what happened. Yeah,
I got a couple comments on Twitter of like, K-State got their ass kicked. We need to maybe go back to the definition of what an ass whooping is. Like 2018 Oklahoma 51-14.
Yeah.
702 total yards to 245. That's an ass kicking. Mississippi State, when they came to Bill Snyder Family Stadium and they were like 7 of 12 on third down conversions. That's an ass kicking. How about 55-0 in 2015? You remember that one when that was what Joe Huebner and that team was like 2 yards a pass, 2 yards a rush, 55-0. Like Brian's right. This wasn't that. They got, I think you could make the argument for sure that they got probably out coached in this one.
Yep.
I think BYU out executed them when you talk about the penalties and the turnovers and that sort of thing. But this was far from, like I said at the top, I don't want to make it sound like BYU didn't win the thing. They did all the things that you need to do to win. But it's like we said in pregame all week, this is the type of game where you felt like if it was played in Manhattan at 2:00, it'd be a different story. And I think after seeing the outcome last night, I agree. I think if this game was at Manhattan, but it wasn't. And so that's what we're here to recap. But let's calm ourselves on like K-State getting throttled. It wasn't a throttled. It was a little fluky and a little alarming, like I said, in certain areas, Cole.
And so guys, I'll say this. K-State, they ran the ball 43 times last night for 228 yards. That's good for 5.3 yards a carry. If you would have told me that K-State ran for 228 yards for 5.3 yards per carry, I probably would have told you they could have won the game 38-9. Yeah. Obviously the interceptions were a big deal, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the plays, but like just from an overarching standpoint, it was very apparent that BYU was just using and riding that wave of momentum. I mean, that's literally what won them the game. There was a 5-minute stretch of game time. And honestly, guys, when halftime hit, I'm like, okay, like this is what K-State needed. They're at halftime. They got saved by the bell, and they can kind of go into the locker room and regroup a little bit. And then Avery Johnson and that Kansas State offense comes back out. They get the ball. I'm thinking, all right, this team's going to go down. They're going to at least kick a field goal, and we're going to start to actually settle in and see a football game. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that was then that next drive was when Avery threw that interception on 3rd and 9. And I honestly was shocked when he didn't throw that football, or when he did throw that football instead of stepping up in the pocket, taking off and running. But after that interception, it felt like, okay, K-State's going to have to be perfect if they want to stay in this game. And they did some good things in the second half on offense, but they did more bad things than they did good things. And it was just weird. Like, I mean, it kind of felt like a basketball game that we've seen so many times where a team will go on a 15-0 run, and you look around the rest of the game and you're like, how did this happen? Because the other team was winning for most of it, and the BYU just held on.
Brien, let me step in here for a second, and you can capitalize on what I'm about to say, because again, it goes into kind of what Cole was talking about with feeling okay, even at halftime. The turnovers, we'll get into the specific, how it happened, why it happened, should it have happened, and all that stuff. And again, I'm going to lead by saying BYU capitalized. You can't erase these plays. They happened. BYU made it happen. But Retzloff to Roberts for a 23-yard touchdown on the first interception. So remember this, 23 yards. Moa had the 24-yard run that set up their second offensive touchdown off the turnover. So there's 23, 24, and then Moa had another 21-yard touchdown in the second half, right? That is 68 of their 241 yards of total offense. Again, you can't erase them. But I'm saying K-State gifted that. That's 100. If you take those 3 plays away, and again, you can't take them away, but that's 173 total offensive yards from BYU outside of those 3 plays, outside of those 3 chunk plays. BYU guys came in averaging 440 yards of offense a game. The defense did their part for the most part. There was some miscommunication in the secondary that we kind of saw against Tulane, and it bit K-State again in this one. And that helped with some of those big chunk plays from BYU. But again, if you went into the game and told me K-State's defense holds BYU to under 250, really, again, outside of those 3 chunk plays, 173 total yards of offense. They had 9.9 per catch, and BYU's coming in averaging almost 15 yards a catch. And you think about the punt return, Wesley Fair misses a tackle that typically probably wouldn't happen from K-State special teams. Mason Olguin misses a tackle that would have pinned them like on the 2. Andrew Leingang has a whiff on the sideline that was really bad, but he shouldn't be in that situation. Colby McAllister, Ty Bowman, and Simon McClannon tripped on teammates. They tripped on their own players on the punt return score. So freak stuff that's happening. But if you tell me K-State's going to give up a punt return touchdown and yet still have like 173 total offensive yards that they're going to surrender, you'd still be feeling pretty good. But it was where they gave the ball up, and it were the times of the miscues could not be worse. But again, all that said, like it's kind of fluky, Brien. Like it just that stuff doesn't unravel that quickly and that painfully every single time. Like it was, again, credit to BYU, they capitalized, but the defense, I guess my point when I talk about those stats is like how well they really played outside of that. And yet they kind of got hung out to dry with where they were with starting field position, because I tweeted out last night, Brien, BYU didn't score. Their longest scoring drive was 62 yards. They scored 1 time, and it was the opening field goal outside of their K-State side of the 50.
Yeah. Here's the thing for me, and I think you're right on all of those accounts, Ryan, because if you watch the game, because people are going to wake up that didn't watch it and think, oh, man, BYU just blew them out. They just dominated that. That's not what happened. But I'm going to go even a step further, and maybe we get into this conversation because I think we have to get into this conversation. K-State lost the game, or I shouldn't say they lost the game, but the problem is you kick 2 field goals when you should have had 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the problem. Now, you can say the pre-snap penalties. I get all of that. And that can't happen. I mean, that's just, again, I mentioned it earlier. It's mind-numbing that that's going on. But the conservative play calling is eventually what cost you, and it got you beat. Stop with the nonsense of 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 9. We're running the football. You know, my whole thing is, if you don't trust your quarterback to go make a football play for you, then what are we doing? It's 3rd and 9, and you're running the ball so you can kick a field goal. And I'm just going to say it. If you don't trust your quarterback to go make a play in that situation, then the offense is bad. The quarterback can't make plays. That's a problem. But, I mean, you talk about top players in this country, top quarterbacks in this country, 3rd and 9, and you're running the ball to set up a field goal in that situation. Come on. Nobody's doing that. And so it's a problem. And I know K-State fans, we don't want to say it. We don't want to talk about it. But damn it, we got to talk about it because it keeps happening. It's not just one game. This is going on over and over and over again. What is going on? Why do we keep settling for this conservative play calling when we are supposed to have this such electric quarterback out there that can do these things, but yet we run the ball on 3rd and 9 trying to score? Oh, we'll just kick a field goal. Well, that gets you beat. And on the road, and we all know that. This is not anything new. You know, when you get conservative and you kick field goals on the road, one thing can happen and it can get you beat. Well, it just turned out a whole bunch of things happened to get them beat because you kick 2 field goals in no situation. And it's like, well, if they score 1 touchdown, they have the lead. Well, they did. And they scored a whole bunch of touchdowns and had the lead. So I think we got to dive into that, Ryan and Cole, because it's mind-numbing. And I keep using that word because I can't think of anything else other than that. I can't get past why we're playing so conservative and what is going on. Because to me, and I know I'm long-winded and I apologize, is they don't trust the quarterback to go make the plays. They don't. And people can be as mad at me as you want. But when you see the offense that's being called out there, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense to any of us, and we're watching. So then what's the story? I need somebody to explain it to me because I watch football just like everybody else. You don't trust them. That's what's going on here.
I have some thoughts on this, guys. And first of all, outstanding points, Brien. You bring up. I'm glad we're getting into this because there's some conversations to be had that need to be had. First things first, I want to address the quarterback situation, and I have total faith in Avery Johnson, much like I think a lot of people have total faith in Avery Johnson. I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. And guys, I still think he's one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. You go through and you watch the Big 12 yesterday. I think it's pretty fair to say Shedeur Sanders is by far and away the best quarterback in this conference right now. But I would put Avery Johnson up there with any other quarterback, even with that game that he had in Provo. Okay, so that's first things first. And I don't know if it's that they don't trust the quarterback, guys, because if they didn't trust the quarterback, I really feel like Will Howard would be on this roster right now.
But why don't they call the plays then, Cole?
It's a great question. And my theory behind it, and again, maybe it's totally baseless, but I sometimes feel like there's a little bit of over-analysis that happens with the play calling and happens in certain situations. Oh, it's 3rd and 9. We want to protect our young quarterback. We want to make sure we don't shake his confidence. So we're going to try and use the strength of our team, which I think we all can acknowledge that running the football is the strength of this football team, just not on 3rd and 9. But I think sometimes it can be, we're going to try and protect the quarterback. And now
and I don't mean to cut you off, but when you say that, isn't that not trusting your quarterback? If it's 3rd and 9 and, I want to protect him, I don't want to rattle his confidence, isn't that you saying, well, I don't trust him?
Yeah, I think that says more about the coaches than it says about the quarterback. Because
I'm not blaming him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him at all.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming Avery Johnson at all. That's not his fault. I mean, he can only call what's being run the plays that are being called. This is not a him problem at all.
it really does feel like kind of the coaches are like, for your safety, we're gonna put your seatbelt on. You know what I mean? And if I'm Avery Johnson, I think, and guys, I really believe this is gonna happen because I've seen K-State teams bounce back like this before. I've seen them get off the canvas and make some adjustments. This feels like a moment in time that the season can go one of two ways, right? It can either go up, and Avery Johnson, this offense, can go and talk to Connor Riley and Matt Wells and say, it's time to take the gloves off. Whatever we have, we're going to do it. You're going to throw it all on me and give me and let me be that leader, or they're going to continue to do what they're going to do, and they're going to win 7 or 8 games, and it is going to be what it is. That's just kind of the way where we're at right now. But again, I agree with you, Brien. Like, at what point does the coaching staff take a look in the mirror and say, what we're doing is not working? Are we successful running the football? Yes. Do we need to be able to run the football first? Yes. But instead of running to set up the run, let's try and mix in a pass every once in a while.
No, and I want to shout out Abe, Jor in the chat, because I do think very briefly I'll touch on this, but and Brien, you've probably noticed it more than me, but like the inconsistency of the offensive line is a problem. And that isn't helping Connor Riley and the offensive coaching staff being able to call plays. At least it seems like in critical situations, every game, maybe twice, 2-3 times a game in some instances, they completely blow blocking schemes. And that makes Avery look worse. That makes everybody look worse. So that needs to be addressed first and foremost. And maybe we as Kansas State fans put too much faith that they would just kind of figure that out, that missing Cooper Beebe and Katori Leviston, like, we'd be okay. Maybe we were a little naive with that. So I'll touch on that first. But getting specifically to Avery Johnson, I've watched the kid since he was a sophomore in high school. There's something going on. And I struggle to think that it's just Avery. And I do think that, at his age and his first year as a starting quarterback, there's got to be some stuff going on in his head naturally. He sees it. He hears it. Like, I think he does probably want to try and look downfield more and keep plays alive with his arm. But at the same time, there were several times last night that the Avery that I watched, and again, high school and college is different, I know, but when a play breaks down, when there is no script left, Avery Johnson at Mays High School takes the hell off and goes, and he just doesn't go. And if come to find out, if it's true that, there's this, we don't want you to get hurt thing going on, that's, again, like Cole said, great analogy, like, we're going to keep your seatbelt on. They got to unbuckle the seatbelt first and foremost. And I don't know how you get him out of the mental state that he's in now. You got to get him back and just say, forget what we've told you in the past, go. But it almost drives me crazy that the seatbelt was on to begin with, because watching Avery as a recruit, guys, one of the things that I've always thought he and Dylan Edwards, for that matter, were really good at is they don't absorb contact. For guys that are more thin in stature, they do a really good job at bouncing off, taking the proper angles where they never really get hit head on. That was one of Avery's strengths as a runner. Like, watching him in high school, you never thought, man, he's going to get popped here.
Like
he
Lamar
never,
Jackson.
He never lets himself take the brunt of any contact. You should know that when you're recruiting him. The amount of times that we see him, Fitz said it in the post game, it wasn't a walk and talk, sit and talk, where Avery seems to be looking for the sideline all the time. There was the third down late in the game last night where if he cuts up, he goes, and Bagley, I think, caught him by the shoelace because Avery tried to bounce out. Texas Tech last year, he's going inside. He's running right up the gut for 50. Something is off there. I can't put my head on it. But also, Cole, I want to go back to what you were saying. Designed runs, Avery was killer last night. 78 yards. His scramble yards were 5. 78 design rushing yards according to PFF. Like, the designed runs were working. Like, maybe you don't want him to be a runner. Maybe you want to be more of a balanced offense. But like Cole said, Brien, like, the strength right now is the running game. And he's really damn good at design runs. it's time to be more of a design run offense with Avery. And it's time to not play so scared that he's going to get hurt.
I mean, at some point you got to play football. And I understand maybe they think, well, if he gets hurt, we don't have a lot behind him. Well, you could say that about pretty much every school in the United States. That's why there's a starter and that's why there's a backup outside of maybe Texas. Okay. But other than that, there's not many teams that are going to be just as good or good at all when their backup is the quarterback. That's just not how this thing works. At any level of football, not just in college, in professional ranks too. So it's not just a Kansas State may or may not have a problem. We don't even know that. But the problem is all around. And again, we shouldn't just, it's never going to get better and just jump off the bridge like the season's over. The season is not over by any means, but there are problems that need to be addressed. Ryan, I think you're exactly right. It's time to start playing football. Well, part of playing football would be start giving Dylan Edwards the football.
Ooh,
and
boy.
Stop with the 7 touches a game and, him just not being out there enough. Enough is enough with that, because here's the thing. Everybody criticized Coach Prime for not utilizing him and not getting him on the field and, said he was a bad coach because he wouldn't utilize this kid. Well, is K-State utilizing him? Because the answer to that is no, they're not. And don't tell me that 7 touches is all that he can do when he's out there. I don't want to hear that. That's not enough. It's not enough. If we have wide receiver problems, put him in the slot and throw him the ball because he can go down and he can make catches. He can do all of that stuff. What are we waiting for? What is the point of having this weapon? And then, we're just going to give it to him 7 times. And I don't care that the game got out of reach yesterday. It wasn't always out of reach. Even after halftime, K-State had an opportunity to be in this game. Even when they were down 24-6, it's still early in the third quarter. There was almost the whole half of the football game to still play. And yet we can't get this guy the ball enough. I get that DJ is a great running back, but isn't there room for everybody? There's got to be. And if you can't, somebody's got to be able to figure out a way, Cole, to get this guy the football. Enough's enough.
Cole. Dylan Edwards, PFF last night, 23 snaps. On the 23 snaps, when like Brien said, some of those snaps, he's not even touching the ball. When he did touch the ball, 6.8 yards per rush and 5 yards on the one catch that he had. On an offense that, like Brien said, lacks any form of dynamic ability right now. And yet he's on the field for 31% of your snaps. And I am so sick, Cole, of the BS excuse that we're not getting enough offensive snaps. In other words, if we had 150 snaps, we could rotate him. No, you had that 23 snaps out of 74 total offensive snaps. That means you had 51 snaps where you could look down the sideline and say, we could get him in the game, and you are choosing not to put him in the game. It's a joke. They've got to get Dylan Edwards on the field more. I don't care if he's a decoy. I don't care if he's a slot receiver. I don't care if he's in the backfield with DJ Giddens or by himself. They have to get Dylan Edwards in the game.
Guys, we know we've seen this movie before. That's, I think, what's so frustrating for those of you who have seen K-State football before, especially at the running back position. Running backs just don't get rotated in. I believe, and I'm fully on board that we need to find other ways, that K-State needs to find other ways for Dylan Edwards to get onto the field, to get him the ball, put him in the slot. They actually did some pretty cool things with both Dylan and DJ in the game at times.
They did the diamond last night, Cole.
They did, and they ran the triple option, and I probably stood up and yelled at the TV because I was so excited. But that doesn't mean the only way that DJ needs, or that Dylan needs to get into the game. They still refuse to rotate the running backs in a manner in which both of them can consistently be successful. It really felt like Dylan was in the game at running back for 4 or 5 plays, and then DJ would come in for 12, 13 in a row consistently.
Yes. He's not a spell guy.
Correct.
And if that's what you think, that's a problem.
Correct. And this has been an issue that has persisted at K-State for a very long time. and it has to be addressed. It just has to be. You cannot use DJ Giddens like Deuce Vaughn and treat Dylan Edwards like freshman year DJ Giddens. That will not work. I'm actually interested in, maybe this is a project for you, Wally, to go back in and look how many carries DJ Giddens got his first 4 games, his freshman year, his first year where he actually played for K-State, because I would go and venture to say that it was very close to the amount of carries, not touches, but carries that Dylan Edwards has this year. And you cannot use him like that. Dylan Edwards is your most dynamic playmaker on the offense outside of your quarterback. Get him the ball. It's really not that hard. And you don't even have to scheme up ways to get him the ball. I think that's what's so frustrating. Just get him the ball in space. Run a freaking outside zone. Let him run. Like it's up the middle. Just get him the ball. He's gonna get positive yards. It's just
let's also give a nod to the chat too, because I was going to bring it up, but they're clearly on top of it. So credit to the chat. Trey Spivey's the same way. They got to get Trey Spivey on the field. I mean, each week that goes by, I get more and more nervous that his eyes start drifting towards the portal. Last night, they finally played him more than Dante Cephas, a whole 17 snaps to 14 snaps. They gave Spivey 1 target. And this goes back to what Brien was saying. This is what's crazy to me about some of the choices. Maybe the biggest thing that has been an issue to me through 4 weeks now, beyond how they're rotating the personnel, is what Brien said with the third down. If it is 3rd and beyond like 4, it's very clear that this offense has no idea what to do. And that's a major, major problem. And honestly, it carried over. That was a problem with Colin Klein last year sometimes. 3rd and medium, they have no idea what they want to be. You had Brien talk about the 3rd and 3rd and 2 or whatever, that they hit Keegan Johnson on for would have been a touchdown. They get the penalty, makes it 3rd and 9. They run DJ Giddens up the middle. Made no sense. But here's the other one, and this gets back to what I was talking about with Spivey. All we hear about in the offseason, at spring, in fall camp, even going back to during the season last year from insiders, is Trey Spivey is unbelievable with his catch radius. In terms of contested catches, he's the type of guy that you can just throw it up to and you give yourself at least a fighting chance to make a catch. Let's go down to the second field goal last night. It was Will Swanson gets hit with the holding call, which was correct call, a little touchy, but correct. So it's 3rd and 5 from the 8. K-State goes 12 personnel. And remember, this was the play where Carver Willis got beat initially and then decleated the guy, which was an awesome highlight for a lineman. Decleats the guy, but Avery scrambles around, ends up making a bad throw to Jace Brown. They kick the field goal, but no Dylan Edwards in on that play. And remember, he had been used 2 or 3 times on that drive to get it in they've used him on the option. They ran that option play to him, but no Edwards was in on the 3rd and 5. They go 12 personnel with Will Swanson and Will Ancio, because Braden Lofton was injured, but no Garrett Oakley. You put Will Ancio in a critical 3rd and 5, who's barely seen the field this year. Clearly, BYU's not going to cover him. And then you have Dante Cephas in with Jace Brown, not Trey Spivey. Clearly, Avery's not going to look at Dante Cephas. That thing is gone.
That's finished.
That's finished. Put Trey Spivey in. The third downs are killer right now, and I would say the player rotation on offense is killer right now. Those, to me, guys, are the 2 things that they've got to fix. They got to fix it.
And Wally, I want to bring this up too, because every time, I shouldn't say every time, USC's played 3 games, and every time I turn on USC and I've watched UFC, oh goodness gracious, USC, I look at their receiver position, and there's a guy out there by the name of Jacoby Lane. And for fans who are familiar with recruiting or who followed that cycle pretty intently, Jacoby Lane at one point, a lot of folks thought K-State might have had a shot to get. And when that ship kind of sailed, he commits to USC. Then there's a guy by the name of Trey Spivey who enters the mix. Both of those guys are from Arizona. Okay, Jacoby Lane was the number 1 wide receiver in that state, the number 5 player in the state of Arizona. Trey Spivey was the number 2. You just look at them from a physical standpoint. Trey Spivey, 6'4", 185. Jacoby Lane, 6'4", 175. Jacoby Lane has 9 catches, but he has 2 touchdowns, and he is one of the top red zone targets for that USC program. It's not like he's putting up massive numbers. But that's just goes to show you that if a young guy like that, similar background, who obviously has a very similar talent structure, K-State has to find a way to get Trey Spivey into the game at points that matter. Don't rotate him in on 2nd and 1 where you're going to turn around and hand the ball off up the middle. Get him in when it's a goal line situation. You really, really mean to tell me that your best receivers down on the goal line are Keegan Johnson and Jace Brown, and then you're going to go 2 tight ends. If you want to run the ball, that's fine. But to have those 2 receivers down in on the goal line, that is not any kind of catch radius, as you talked about, Wally. There's no threat of any kind of 50-50 jump ball. There just isn't. And I know that kind of is going away in football, but there is still a place for it when you have 5 or 6 inches over the defender. And
Brien,
to have a guy who can do that and not utilize it, again, it goes back to the Dylan and the Avery running. It just, I don't know, guys. There has to be some steps taken back and some mirrors looked into at this point on the offensive side of the football.
Brien, how surprised were you at some of the play calling within the 20? And I say that from the standpoint, I'm asking you from the standpoint of, we knew going into the game that BYU is one of the best red zone defenses there is. You can move it between the 20s. Once
Correct.
you get in the 20, they were incredible. They still have not allowed a passing touchdown all season.
Yeah.
Did that surprise? Like, to me, that's something that I figured K-State would be working on all week. Like, when we get in the red zone, we got a freaking script that we think will work. They look lost in the red zone last night.
Well, here's the thing. K-State refuses to use the middle of the field. And I don't know how long or how many times we're going to have to say it. I mean, they just absolutely are allergic to throwing the ball in the middle of the field, no matter where it is, whether inside the 20s, in between the 20s, we just won't throw the ball in the middle of the field. When you get in the red zone, you have to be willing to use the middle of the field. You can't just handcuff yourself by going outside the hashes and especially outside the numbers to throw the football. The field is already condensed enough just because you don't have the room. Now you're going to condense it even more because you just won't use the middle of the field. I don't know how many times we're going to have to say that until it changes. Now, I will say this. Avery struggles to throw the ball over the middle of the field. He just does. That's just an absolute fact. Doesn't throw the ball well over the middle of the field. But I also don't know that there's a whole lot of routes that are being called over the middle of the field to even give him the necessary looks or to draw defenses. That's more important. Let some defensive guys. I mean, BYU basically said, we're going to play cover 2 because we know you're not throwing it down the middle of the field. We just know it. And we dare you to do it. And we didn't. The only time he does is a bad throw. Guy wasn't open, throws it right to a linebacker that he didn't see. I understand that those kind of things are going to happen. But to not even give yourself an opportunity to do that, we can talk about the receivers and them not getting open. I believe that's some of it. But, Ryan, what you're talking about, man, you're right. It's just there's no plan. And the plan can't just be – or if it is, let me backtrack. If the plan is we're going to go for it on 4th down, so we're going to run it on 3rd and 5, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Because that's literally the script. That's what you do. If you're going to go for it on 4th, you run it on 3rd and 5 or even 3rd and 6. I'm for that. But to run it on 3rd and 6 and then just to kick a field goal, I'm like, what is going on? And that's why I come back to, I'm not sure the coaches trust what the offense can do. They don't trust the quarterbacks to make the plays because if they do, there's no way in the world that we consistently, this is not just a 1-game problem. It's consistently been an issue this season where we're just settling. And when you settle, you get beat. It didn't look good, and it hasn't looked good. We got to change it. We got to change the philosophy. The conservative play calling is going to end up having us win 7 football games this year when it's a team that could win 10. Well, I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, we got to change something. Again, this is not hey, we lost 1 game and we got to change our entire offensive philosophy. I don't think you have to do that. But what you do need to do is implement things to help. Implement things that maybe you're not doing that you need to be doing. If nothing else, just to open up other avenues of what you really want to do. Sometimes you run football plays, not necessarily to be successful, but to show another team, hey, we will actually run this. And if you don't cover it, we're going to beat you. That's what a good play caller does. They set up stuff. We don't set up stuff, Ryan. It's almost like we're calling, okay, it's 3rd and 6. We're going to call this play. Not even thinking about going at 4 on 4th down. Or it's 2nd and 8. We're going to call this play. Well, did you think about what if it was going to be 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6? No, we don't think about that. We're just calling the 2nd and 8 play. It's not what a good play caller does, and it seems we're getting behind ourselves with that.
Can I step in here too? And I don't care if this sounds like an Avery apologist. There's a lot of comments in the chat. There's comments on Twitter that Avery Johnson basically isn't the guy, right? That he's not who we thought he was.
That's just stupid.
Wrong. To me, Avery Johnson is not the problem. Also, if you're disappointed in Avery Johnson, this goes back to what I was saying, what a lot of us were saying really before the season started. If you're disappointed in Avery Johnson because you thought he was this 400-yard passer, 200-yard rusher, Heisman Trophy finalist, that's your own freaking problem. You had it wrong from the get-go.
Correct.
It's his first year starting with a brand new offense behind a brand new offensive line. It is what it is. Give the kid a chance to get his feet under himself. But it goes back to what Brien was talking about. Avery struggles to throw the ball downfield. He's never been, I don't think he's ever been the arm, right? He's not an arm talent. Avery is at his best when he's improvising, when he's on the run, scrambling, design runs outside the pocket, and it's kind of 20 yards and in as a thrower. If you're asking him to be a sit back and throw it 30 plus, that's not his skill set. And Cole, that's what's starting to drive me nuts. And I wanted to see kind of the season go a little bit before I pointed the finger on it. I don't think the scheme matches what the offensive individual talent is this year. Yeah. They're trying to make a square peg fit in a circle hole. Instead of building around what Avery does best, they seem to be, this is the offense that we want to run. Let's try and run it. And that's what's starting to drive me nuts. It's not an Avery problem. Avery might not be as good as you guys thought he would be, and he might need some time, and that's okay. He's going to make some turnovers. The ones last night weren't great, but I think he's being put in situations that are just not suited to his strengths whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what, guys? I firmly believe that this will get fixed. And I have seen this movie before, and as much as we want to sit here and say, oh, it's inexcusable that every year in September, Coach Kleiman has a clunker. I'm not disagreeing with you, but how many teams don't have a clunker in the beginning part of the year? Guys, Clemson, who looked absolutely unbelievable, who has looked unbelievable against NC State, and every other team they played, got absolutely demolished by Georgia. Now, I'm not comparing BYU to Georgia, but how many times have we seen the elite teams, the elite programs, minus the Georgias? Look at Oklahoma, for example. I know they're kind of growing through some stuff. They looked horrible last night. All the good programs, minus, at this point in the season, the Georgias, and I'm not even going to throw Alabama because they had their clunker against USF. It was just at home. Have struggled. It just reared its ugly head in Provo. And I don't think any team in the Big 12, if you would have given them, you could have swapped out Kansas State, put on Utah, put Oklahoma State. The way that game went last night, almost any team in the country is losing that game.
Right.
The way with the offensive, with the miscues, the turnovers, any team in the country is losing that game. And so I'm not going to sit here and apologize and say, oh, K-State's going to be bad. I'm ready to say that it's time to move on. And we talk about this coaching, guys. I think it goes right back into that. Like, when do the coaches have to take a look in the mirror and say, if we don't adjust, we will die, right? Like, that's really what it comes down to. And I think this week they're going to do that.
Well, this comment, I mean, I like it, but I mean, we haven't just been talking about the kids not executing. Yeah. I mean, the pre-snap penalties, and that's their fault. That's not coaching. Yeah. You know, you can't blame coaching for creating these penalties and all that stuff, or being rattled. I don't even think you blame coaches for being rattled. Look, you as a player have to understand what's going on. You can't just expect your coaches to go. First of all, they can't go out there and play for you. You know, the crowd's still going to be loud. What do you expect them to do? You know, they get you ready. They play the crowd noise in practice, but that's up to you as a player to be right. But I agree with the premise of this whole thing is you've got to put guys in the right positions, and that's what we're talking about, continuously doing the same thing. That's why K-State fans are so frustrated, is because it's the same thing all the time. It's like, why can't we change? Somebody put in the chat earlier, a great comment, is that Coach Snyder changed his offense to throw the ball to Tyler Lockett because, you know what? We got this NFL guy as a wide receiver. We need to throw the football more than we run it. Okay. Well, then what's wrong with doing that now? What's wrong with changing the offense for what it is right now and getting a guy that has all this talent, these guys, not just one guy, all these guys that have all these talent, get them the ball in spaces. Just like you mentioned, Ryan, don't make them fit into what you're trying to do. That's what the sign of good coaching. You've got to fit what they do best. And if you're not going to utilize what they do best, then why did you recruit them? You recruited them to bring them here so they can't excel at what they do best? That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why K-State fans are so frustrated, is because, and that's why I'm frustrated, you guys are frustrated, is because, hey, what are we doing? I understand we can win some games, but I don't want to just win games. I don't want to win just 8 games. I'm tired of always being the team that says, well, we won 8 games. That's good enough. No, it isn't good enough. It just isn't. We can be better if we just try to be better. And I'm not saying that people aren't trying, but what I am saying is when there's a problem, you fix it. When there's things that you can do better, you do better. I go, if we talk about doing that in everyday life, we can't do that in a football meeting room? Of course we can. Well, let's start doing that. It's a bad loss. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not that BYU's not a good team, and they took advantage of every mistake that we made, which coincidentally is a sign of a really good team, is that when they take advantage of other teams' mistakes, that's what you're supposed to do when you're a good team. You know, so I think BYU's a little bit better. I don't think they're great. I'm not going to go that far, but I think they're better than what people think they are. But K-State, it was a clunker. Now they got to bounce back. The one thing that I will say is kind of what you mentioned, Cole. We've seen this before. We've seen K-State have a poor game, and then the next game they come out and they throttle somebody. Well, they got to do it again because Oklahoma State was bad. I mean, the game, again, if you just look at that game, that box score, you're going to think, it was a close game. No, it wasn't.
No.
So Utah physically whipped Oklahoma State for over 3.5 quarters. I mean, for basically 55 minutes of that game, they physically beat them up the whole football game. So they're not going to want that to happen again. K-State's got to figure some stuff out.
I will say this, guys. I think, sometimes coming out of after a game like this, you maybe you don't learn a whole lot. Because let's say, all due respect, let's say you got Cincinnati next. And it's like, well, of course we're going to look better against Cincinnati. Of course we're going to look like we figured something out at Cincinnati. Oklahoma State hasn't been great, but Gundy's going to have those guys ready. They got players at just about every single level. Maybe they're not going to execute like Brien said. They haven't been tremendous with their consistency at execution. Right. But I mean, outside of like maybe Iowa State being next, I love that it's Oklahoma State. And I love that it's Oklahoma State coming off of the type of performance that they had. We will find out a lot about K-State next week because that's a team that can beat K-State. That's a team that you do have to fix some things in order to look like the team that we expect you to be. You're not just going to go out and look better because they stink. I love the fact that you've got Oklahoma State next. We will learn a ton about K-State this time next week.
I agree. And first of all, shout out to those of you who have been in the chat all morning long. Thank you, Matthew, for the super chat. We always appreciate those. He said, after the start of the third quarter, I just went to bed. I've never seen a 2 to 3 minute collapse like that in my life. Again, we've talked about it, but like just when it all goes downhill, it goes downhill fast. And the proverbial crap hit the fan. And that's exactly what happened.
You don't have a leader to step in and stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what happened and I'm not saying that K-State doesn't have leaders on their football team, but what I am saying is somebody's got to step in and say, okay, guys, let's stop let's take account of what's happening here, and let's fix this problem. Let's go back. Look, we were dominating them. We gave them everything that they have. Let's stop it, and let's go play better football. And then I just thought the play calling in the second half, Ryan, coming out of halftime, I thought it was totally wrong. And the reason being is because now you're listening. Okay, we should have been a little bit more aggressive at the end of the half instead of trying to run the football. We fumble it. It is what it is. Then we throw on a screen where, again, guys not blocking at all and too much pressure in the quarterback's face. It is what it is. That's when you come out and run the football. Come out in the second half and you make a statement. Okay, right. Let's run it down their throat like we had the first half. Instead, that's not what we do. And then it just goes from there. I thought it was a mistake.
Yep. Again, finely tuned, real talk. Thank you. Appreciate that. We've seen your comments. Appreciate you contributing to the discussion for everyone in the chat. And Matthew, of course, says he loves the morning stream. I guess we can just go ahead and throw our applications in to be the preachers on Sunday morning. You don't have to go to church when you can just see here and listen to us. Guys, this is my, as we kind of look ahead towards next week and start to kind of wrap this baby up. I look at this game, and again, it goes one of two ways, right? You either wake up in the morning, and if you're K-State, and it's like that night where you just went out and you went way too hard, right? Everybody knows we've all had those nights. You went way too hard, and you woke up in the morning, you're like, I am too old for this. I need to change. I can't do that. I haven't had that experience yet. I know it's going to happen sooner rather than later, but it's one of those things to where, okay, I know that we have to change. Like something has to change. It's that come to Jesus moment. It's that aha. It's that realization. Okay, this will not work. And if I continue down this road, bad things will happen. You can see the future and it doesn't look bright. So either K-State is going to continue down this road. And like you talked about, Brien, they're going to win 8 games. And we're all going to be sitting here saying, it could have been a great year. You know, they had some good times. They had some good opportunities. Everybody comes back next year. Or they can look in the mirror and they say, okay, well, if we're going to win 8 games, then we're going to win 8 games trying to make adjustments. We're not just going to win 8 games by doing the same old thing because nobody likes that. I truly believe this. If K-State makes some adjustments and we see them come out and play a different style of football against Oklahoma State, regardless of a win or a loss, I think that shows improvement. I think K-State will win next week after everything that I saw happen in Stillwater. You talk about a quarterback situation. Come on, guys. Holy smokes between what's going on in Stillwater. Whew. But K-State has a great opportunity next week, but they have to make some changes. And it might not be pretty, but they have to make some changes or we could start to see this thing. I don't want to say unravel, but the expectations will have to be lowered significantly.
Personnel changes is what they got to do.
Yes.
Personnel changes and some identity. Ryan, I know you're all over the personnel changes. I'm right there with you, man. Enough is enough. We're not that football program, and we never have to be that football program that settles. We just don't. We don't. We talked about how much depth we have. Well, let's see it. Let's see it. We got all this depth that the coaches have been preaching. Let's see it because right now we got to make some change. And again, you don't go off the deep end after one game, but this is just the game that we lost. This doesn't mean that this was the first time that this has been a problem. It's not the first time this has been a problem. It's just the first game that we lost. So it gets magnified, and it was magnified in a big way.
I will just finish with this, guys. And I mean, Fitz has said this many times, but if you're glass half full looking forward as a K-State fan, as Cole said, you know, this was kind of, I mean, it is a little bit fluky and every team's kind of due for one of these just weird games. And unfortunately, it really spiraled for K-State last night. The other unfortunate part is I'm not convinced that BYU is going to like finish out and this will end up looking like that great of a loss. They're competitive. I don't know if they're going to be a 9 or 10 win team. Like, now, the benefit is it was a national televised game, but was anybody awake to watch it?
Right.
So you do kind of have that going. But as Fitz has said, fellas, this is a beauty contest. This is a beauty pageant. And so from here on out, not only does K-State need to win, they got to look better doing it. You got to win the conference. But if you don't win the conference and you still have hopes of trying to backdoor your way in the college football playoff, it's a beauty pageant, and you've got to show a little bit more flash. You got to show a little bit more pop, and you got to beat some teams. Not squeak any out, and certainly not have what happened last night happen again. Another loss is killer, but another loss like that in that fashion, you're dead in terms of college football playoffs. So yeah, it's a beauty pageant, and K-State's got to really put some makeup on from here on out.
Yep. As I had a football coach once tell me, it's time to put some lipstick on that pig. And I think that's what K-State needs to do as they get set for Oklahoma State on Saturday. We appreciate everybody so much for joining this stream, talking some Kansas State and BYU. Fellas, anything else before we wrap up the show?
No, I like I said, it was a bad game, but it was just one game. And things can be fixed, but they got to be willing to fix it. That's all. I think that's kind of what we've talked about is we see the things that are out there. Clearly, they have to see those things as well. They can be fixed, but they have to be willing to do it. And like you mentioned, Ryan, some of it's not going to be pretty, but you know what? It doesn't need to be pretty. We just care about winning. That's it. However you win, just win.
Hey, Cole, at least you're not waking up a Jayhawk today.
I was waiting for somebody to say that.
It could be worse.
It could be worse.
My goodness.
Fellas, I'm going to take a football cleanse. I'm going to go down to this art festival that they're having here in Kansas City and take a football cleanse. I don't know if Big B, that's possible for you to do. I know the Steelers are on here soon, so good luck to them. The Seahawks as well. The Chiefs have the Sunday night game. We'll be tuned in. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening this morning. We will be back next week with another post-game podcast. Until then, have a great week. Have a nice end to your weekend.